Christ.
Please be seated. In our gospel lesson this morning, Jesus tells a very strange parable. He says that a man tells his servants to go out and sow good seed in the field, but when the plants come up, it turns out that there are weeds in the field along with the wheat. And the servants come to the master and say, "Sir, there are weeds in the field. Where did these come from? Did you not sow good seed?" And the master says, "An enemy has done this." And the servants say, "Do you want us to go out and gather the weeds up and take them out of the field?" He says, "No. If you do that, you'll uproot the good wheat at the same time. So let them grow along with the wheat. And when the harvest comes, the reapers will separate out the weeds from the wheat and burn the weeds up." So the disciples were a bit mystified by this, and later on they asked him what this parable meant. He said, "Well, the good seed are the children of the kingdom, and the bad seed are the children of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed the bad seed is the devil. And at the end of the age, angels will come and separate out the children of the kingdom from the children of the evil one, and the children of the evil one will be burned up, and the children of the kingdom will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father." Well, one way of understanding this parable is that it is about the purity of the early church. From early on, the church had to deal with this issue of who can be a member of the church. I mean, is it just for the pure and the devoted and the righteous, those who are scrupulous in keeping all the rules of the church and steadfast, pure in their devotion to God? Or is there a place in the church for the wavering and the timid and the half-hearted and the backsliders and the people who fall away and come back and the hypocrites? Is there a place for them too? And what Jesus is saying here, I think, is that there will always be weeds in the church. If you try to root out everybody from the church who isn't pure, for one thing, you'll have a very small church. And for another thing, you'll do more damage to the church than it was worth. So the church is not just for perfect people. Church is for everybody. Church is for saints and sinners, which is a good thing for most of us. But there is more to this parable than that. What Jesus is doing here is talking about evil in the world. What do we do when we find evil at work? Well, I don't like to think a lot about evil. It's kind of a dark and depressing subject. But, what they say that there's two errors when it comes to thinking about evil. One is to not think about it enough. And the other evil is to think about it too much and to obsess about it. So we need to find a balance. I don't think of myself as an expert on evil, but I've learned a lot from reading a book called The People of the Lie by M. Scott Peck. Scott Peck was a psychiatrist, and in 1983 he wrote this book, The People of the Lie, which summarized many of his interviews with people in his private practice as a psychiatrist. Now, he said most of his cases were, sort of garden variety, mental problems, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, cases which could be diagnosed and treated and many times cured. But he said occasionally he would find a case in which that just didn't work. The rules didn't apply. And he said those were cases where there was evil at work. Now, evil is not a psychiatric diagnosis, but Scott Peck is a man of faith, and he felt that this was the only way to really understand what was happening in these cases. He told a story about a 15-year-old boy who was brought to him by his parents. And this young man was suffering from depression. When Scott Peck talked to him, he said that he wanted to go to a boarding school so he could get away from his parents. But he wouldn't say much more. 15-year-olds are not usually very articulate about their feelings. So Peck met with the parents, and they were distant and evasive, and they were like emotionally cold people, and they were withholding affection from their son and applying punishment that was inappropriate, and so the boy had become depressed. But when Peck suggested that the couple go into counseling and into analysis, they rejected that whole idea. They said, there's nothing wrong with us. We are upstanding, successful, moral people. We just brought our son here so you could fix him. Well, Scott Peck said that their refusal to admit that they had any part in this and their refusal to take any kind of responsibility for their son was evil. He said this sometimes happens when people refuse to admit the truth about themselves. And they create this false image about themselves as righteous, upstanding, moral people. But underneath, they're unfeeling and cruel. They are people of the lie because they're living a lie. Evil flourishes when the truth is not told. Now, one of the basics of the Christian faith is that we understand that we are sinners. But we believe that if we confess our sins to God, tell God the truth, then we will be forgiven and we can go on. Evil people, however, refuse to even admit that they've done anything wrong, and they lie to others and they lie to themselves. They say, I haven't done anything wrong. It's those other people that are the problem, not me. Second thing evil people do is to project their darkness onto other people and then try to destroy them. It's called projection. We can't deal with our own anger inside, so we project it on someone else, and then they become a scapegoat that we can try to get rid of. For instance, the Salem witch trials of the late 1600s, in which young women and girls were accused of witchcraft, and many were put to death. The sickness of the community was projected onto them, and then they felt like they had to destroy them, to kill them. And that's evil. Or take Hitler, who was inside a warped and twisted person, but he projected that darkness onto the Jewish people, and 6 million people were killed in the Holocaust, 6 million Jewish people. Well, in the parable of the weeds and the wheat, Jesus is saying, don't do that. Don't project your evil onto other people. Yes, there's going to be weeds among the wheat, yes. But be careful about that. You may turn out to be wrong. It may turn out that those weeds are not really weeds, but they're useful in some way. And if you go destroying all those who are not like you, you'll find that you do more damage than if you just let them coexist along with you. Do you remember that story in the Gospels where Jesus and the disciples come to a town, and they're not welcomed by the town. And as they're walking away, the disciples ask Jesus, Lord, do you want us to call down lightning from heaven and destroy that town? They had the same feeling. And Jesus says, no, that's not the way it works. When we see people that we think are evil, we have to be very careful. If we attack them, then it may turn out that we are just as evil as they are, or even worse. And we may do more damage than we realize. And when Jesus was surrounded by evil people and taken away to be crucified, he didn't attack them. He didn't call for war. He took the evil on himself and went to the cross. In his book, Scott Peck tells about a dream that one of his patients had. This patient had been abused by his father when he was a little boy. And in his dream, he was in a war, he was a soldier, and he was standing in front of the house where he grew up in, where the abuse took place. And his father was in the house. And so this soldier in his dream got on the radio and he called his platoon leader and he said, send in a mortar strike to hit right here. And he wanted to kill his father in the house. And he realized that he himself would probably die as well. And it didn't really seem to matter to him. So the platoon leader said that he was busy. He had lots of calls for mortar strikes. He couldn't get to it right away. And the soldier pleaded with him to do it. And he said, I'll even give you a case of whiskey if you call in this mortar strike. And the platoon leader said, well, I'll get to it eventually. And then in the dream, the dreamer saw a group of innocent civilians walking up the street to go to the house. And he realized that they were going to be killed. So he got on the radio again and he called the platoon leader and he said, stop it, cancel the mortar strike. We can't have it happen. I'll even give you a case of whiskey if you cancel the call. So the platoon leader agreed to call it off, and then the man woke up from his dream and he was greatly relieved. And that was the beginning of his recovery from his illness. He didn't have to destroy the evil. He didn't have to pull up the weeds. He was able to be a more healthy person. Well, there is evil in the world. That's true. But we have to be careful in how we respond to it so that we don't become part of the evil itself. In the Bible, it says that judgment belongs to God, not to us. And what Jesus taught us, in the end, love is the only answer to evil.